Welcome to Board Gamers Anonymous, the podcast of board gamers and the insane fun we have at the table together. This is Chris.
And this is Anthony.
And this is episode 478, Games That Need an Expansion. We'd like to thank all our Patreon backers for helping us bring you a brand new review. Anthony, we got a new episode. It's reviewing all of the great games that are just almost quite somewhat there, but they just need a little something. Just a little something.
Yeah, little something. We did this episode last in 2018.
Wow.
Episode 167, and we talked about the games that needed an expansion, right? So we have 10 games from that list. We're going to revisit that list. We're going to talk about the ones who actually eventually got an expansion. For some, it happened.
We were young and we didn't know any better.
Yeah, there's more. And then a bunch more games that have come out since that also need expansions because they're either not quite there or we think they could be even better.
It is possible to make a game better. That used to be the thing that expansions were known for. And now they're known for being prepackaged in a Kickstarter that you now must buy because reasons.
Yeah, it's
Money
annoying.
Reasons.
Yeah, like I was going through my collection being like, what other games need expansions? And I'm like, oh, that game would be good with an expansion. I'm like, no, that game already has one and it's not very good because it was like thrown in a Kickstarter and it's not play tested at all.
No.
And it's just a bunch of bloat and nonsense. The game could use an expansion, but not that one, but they're never going to do it because they did the Kickstarter. Okay, fine. That's all the games now. So.
Yeah, I typically think, like, again, not to be that guy as far as back in the day is concerned, but back in the day, the core game got played by the public. Again, you can only play test a game so much. But when the game gets played by the public, you get feedback as a designer, as a publisher. And then you address that feedback, again, typically somewhat, through an expansion. And again, we did an episode, one of my favorite episodes, where we talked about the different types of expansions. And they're kind of like certain tropes that come out as far as expansions are concerned. But they are typically more or less, other than just revitalizing a product or reminding you that thing actually exists or getting it to the table again, was there to like make the game better. And we got a list of games that need to be a little bit better because they're missing out on a key element. At least we feel so.
Right. Yeah. Like, and some games just kind of play themselves out.
Sure.
And maybe something would bring them back to the table after several years. Some of the games from our last list were that. They were like,
yes,
this game was good. We liked it. It's kind of played out. We need more stuff. And here's how you could do that.
So and some games need to stop making expansions.
That's a different list, but we do have it. We have that list.
Damn it. Stop it. We can either afford our money or our sanity. Dear God, stop producing those expansions.
Yeah, maybe next week we'll go through all the games that need to stop making expansions. We have a list of at least 5.
There's I'm already having some terrible flashbacks. And collect that again, and collect it again, and get the new expansion. The new expansion fixes the old expansion, but has modules for the new expansion. Stop. I don't want any more. I can't fit it on my shelf. I can't fit it in my brain.
Yeah, like flashback to the video games that, like, when you buy everything together, it's like $400. You're like, wait, what? How?
Oh, I'm not going to play without the new expansion. Oh, wait a minute. I only play with the core game set. Oh, there we got new people playing. We can't play with. No more. No more. But that's for next week. That's not this week. This week is the games that need the expansion. So more of those things. We're sending positive vibes out there. Yeah. We're sending out vibes to our designers and publishers out there and being like, listen, we got a thing for you. So listen to the feature because we're going to go look back and then obviously see what we need today. But Anthony, before we go on to all that kind of fun stuff, crazy stuff in the world happening, of course, Fantasy Flight is kind of doing a thing. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, when we talked about it, not too long ago, was that last week before?
Uh-huh.
We've got a new version of the Star Wars deck building game.
Yeah.
And it was like rumored before. It's like a weird, like off color picture that someone had taken at some event. I don't know.
Yeah.
But Fantasy Flight finally posted it to their website yesterday when we're recording this. So last
Great.
week, Star Wars the deck building game, Clone Wars Edition.
Ooh.
Yes, it is official. So if you go to the website, you can now see several examples of the cards. We've got ATRTs, we got Obi-Wan
Ooh.
Kenobi, we got Ayla
Uh-huh.
Secura, we got General Grievous, we got Jar
Ooh.
Jar Binks.
Oh, you went too far.
He's there, man.
Uh,
He's
you
there.
went too far. We were almost there. I was almost gonna click the button.
I even skipped a few just to get to Jar Jar for you.
All right. Fine.
Um, it's a terrible card if it helps.
It's purposely a teleport card.
Terrible, terrible card. It's a card you pass to your opponent when you play it because it's that bad. Um, so the game is a standalone. It's not an expansion. It's a standalone expansion. You can play it by itself, or you can separate out all the decks and draft them out and play them in whatever permutation you want. They even have like a description of how to do that on their website of, you know what, if you want to mix and match, go for it. Here are the ways to do that. You build your decks using the cards from the Empire, Rebel, Republic, or Separatist decks, and then the neutral cards based on the edition of the game that you're playing with. So it's a little fiddly, but you can do it. So if you want to play Separatists against Empire, go for it. It is possible to do that. Um, but that's all the information we really have right now. It's coming out in August, which means they'll probably launch it at Gen Con.
Sure.
And it's cool. Like, I'll probably pick it up at some point. The Star Wars deck building game, when it's not on sale, is like $40.
Mhm.
So, meh. And I
Yeah.
already have it. So, double meh. But my son in particular really likes Clone Wars versus original trilogy stuff. So, I'll probably still get it. I'll just wait for it to go on sale like the old one has. Um,
Sure.
but it's looking cool.
Maybe you can switch him off the pay to play one to the nice buy it once and actually be able to play it.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be good.
The old switcheroo.
Yeah. I mean, we've been playing a lot of Star Wars Unlimited, but I will say he's not really like we're still mostly on the starter decks.
Okay.
I
That's
have
good. That's really good.
we have bought some like the boosters, but I don't think I'm going to buy boosters from the second set, which come out next week,
Mhm.
because we're not really using the ones we have from the first set, and why spend that money, right?
Sure.
So,
It depends on what's in the next set. Is it
maybe it's like Mandalorian stuff, and he
I
really
figured.
likes the Clone Wars stuff, which
Oh, okay.
is fine. It's great. I don't like it or dislike it. But this might be perfect for that because it is exactly what he knows.
Yes. And it's a lot. I don't know. I don't wanna downgrade it. It's I think having played both of them, I think they're fairly similar as far as complexity is concerned. I mean, obviously, you're not
Right.
deck building in advance. You're making your deck as you go, but I don't know. I mean, they're both rather good. I think he might enjoy the structure of that, like the limitation as far as like once you get into boosters and other packs, like I think that's when it becomes overwhelming.
Yeah, and we really just haven't done that very much. I think for that exact reason that it
Yeah.
is kind of overwhelming. Like,
It becomes the
hey,
meta issue.
we
Yeah.
have this whole box of boosters that we bought. Here's all the cards. Here's all the different things. We have enough Mace Windows if you want to build a deck around Mace Windu. And he's like, I don't know. Like,
A
who do I
Samuel L.
throw in with?
Jackson.
Yeah, like who do I throw in with Mace Windu? I don't know. Like, it's a Clone Wars thing. He's like, kind of.
Yeah.
Like, so I was like, okay, fair enough. Let's just play the base game with what it comes
Sure.
with. And I'm like, if we're just playing the base game of a CCG,
Yeah.
then I don't need to be buying CCG stuff. Let's just buy the
No.
deck building game.
And the CCG certainly forces the meta upon you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Playing thematically is almost a detriment. You have to play towards the meta, even if you just whatever hand you get. You can't be like, well, he wouldn't be working with so and so. Like, no, that's out the window. That's not a
yeah.
thing.
And like the meta decks right now are super, super not canonical. Like, if you
Sure.
care about that stuff and the way they're building them, like the Sabine deck is like it's up there. And I'm like, but the way you build it, I'm like, that's not
No,
any of the people she would have interacted with. And like,
no.
but that's not how a CCG works, and fine, right? So, um, yeah, the deck building game is great. I'm hoping to get kind of
Yeah,
pushed back in that direction.
and that thematically you can certainly play out the story because everything's from that era and on that particular side. And then if you want, you could pull in some neutral characters, but you don't have to,
Right,
which is a lot of fun. So,
right.
and even destroying characters on that mid row, as far as the market's concerned, is also a lot of fun.
I
So,
love that. It is my favorite mechanic in that game.
yeah,
Yes, that is the best way to fix a two-player deck building game is
yes.
to just make it possible to do that. It's not something you can do in most of those games.
The number of times I've played a tabletop game and you can't refresh the market,
Uh,
I've honestly wanted to flip tables over that. And
yes.
can someone please buy one of these junky cards so we can see something else during this game? They're like, I'm not buying that. Like, well, I'm not buying that. I'm like, well, there goes the game. Like, that's nope. I don't want to do that. Oh, I can blow up the other stuff and that'll actually even give me points to do that. Yes, yes, absolutely. I will do that. That will be all the kinds of fun. So yeah. No, I was leaning CCG, but now I'm going back to the deck builder, man. I think
No,
that's
man,
working for me.
I'm there. That's what I'm doing.
All right, sounds cool. Yeah, no, so a lot of fun stuff happening out there in the BGG board game geek kind of world out there. Anthony just mentioned ever so briefly, just because it's a little bit crazy, but there was a game on Kickstarter that on BGG is like the worst rated game of all time,
Yeah.
and somehow made $1.2 million because I don't know NFTs or AI or
Yeah, I think it's mostly well, I guess it's both.
yeah.
I guess the NFT thing, I'm like, who's still doing that?
These
Like,
guys are.
seriously, who is still doing that? Nobody, everybody knows that they're a scam. No, thank you. The AI art thing, I am a 1,000,000% on the side of the Luddites. Like, uh, artificial intelligence, it's not producing art. It is amalgamating other people's artwork into a new structure. Like, it's not as an artist myself, as a teacher, I cannot overstate this enough. It is not actually producing anything. It is taking a bunch of other people's work and like blending it together. So when you use that, it's not just that you're being lazy, which whatever. Capitalism is about laziness. Whoever's the laziest wins, right?
That's right.
It's you're stealing from other people, and that's what
Sure.
really makes me angry, and that's what makes everybody else so angry.
Yeah.
It's not the laziness, it's the stealing. You are actively stealing from other people,
Yeah.
and if you don't believe that, then you're wrong. I don't have to tell you. Like,
Yeah.
so I think that's what's making people the most angry. NFTs are like, what are you doing? That's stupid. But the AI artwork, it just being like openly like, yeah, this is what we're doing. Who cares? Woof. That's rough. Somehow the stupid game still made over $1 million though.
Yeah.
So I guess enough people don't care or
And
think that that's overreaction or we are actually being Luddites. I don't know.
I don't think it's a bad thing to be cautious, especially when it's based on like such shaky ground to begin with. And if the art itself is on that shaky ground, who's to say you know, what the rules are based on or the mechanics are based on are any better?
Right.
Or if the system that you'll be playing with, especially this is a CCG, right? This is so you take a quite a risk anytime you buy into a CCG because there's a lot of requirements and needs when it comes to CCG.
They're very expensive. They all factor in the collector's market to their pricing.
Yeah,
Um and the collector's market doesn't always develop, right? And then the pricing is ridiculous as a result. Like if there is no value to the cards, paying $6 for a pack of cards is insane.
sure,
Like it's all based on that value. So it's how the whole thing is priced and modeled, and that's not these guys. That's every CCG since like
sure,
1997. But like weaponizing that to an effect and then using AR artwork to kind of shortcut, fast track it. That's I think that's where people get mad. So um to your point, yeah, like if they're willing to just kind of skimp on the artwork, are they going to skimp on the rules? We don't really know because we haven't played the game.
yeah. So Wonders of the First CCG, what a name, I tell you.
Yeah.
Uh, 1.4 on BGG.
So bad.
And Kickstarter made so much money, and supposedly people backed at the $4,000 and $6,000 level. It's already done, so you're safe from this. But you can certainly still go to Kickstarter or read the endless numbers of comments on BGG, ripping it up and down. Again, I don't. I think there's certainly more to this than just even the artwork, right? There's just a lot of other problems and issues to this, and things surrounding this. And again, we've been reviewing, and even used to do the Kick in the Habit podcast. Like, this is not new. Like, people were faking artwork or stealing artwork from other artists or IPs and trying to put them off as their own, right? And it never ends well. It just doesn't. It just never ends well. Like, even if the project backs, there's lawsuits, there's bad production issues, the company is just stealing money, like, if someone's doing a somewhat shady thing to begin with, you don't, especially when it comes to CCG, do not continue to follow them. It just don't. So, but I guess we'll see. It's a number one game. It's a number one hotness, man, on BGG. How that's not a good reason to be that.
No, no. I think
Uh,
people forget sometimes what the hotness measures. It's just activity.
yes.
It's positive, negative. It's the classic all press is good press on BGG. It's literally true. You're number one because you're terrible.
Yeah. So if you've backed Wonders of the first CCG, let us know. I would love to know why, and I am hoping for the best for you and everyone involved with that. Because sketchy be sketchy, bro. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
All
super
right,
sketchy.
it happens. All right. Well, Anthony, that's what's going on with the craziness out there in the world, amongst other things. What's going on with our Patreon? You got something coming up for us?
Yeah. We are due for a new Patreon uh, specific episode just for our backers. Last couple of bonus episodes, we had the Level Up Your Tabletop Teach and Level Up Your Mental Health episodes. They are available as audio presentations on the Patreon if you are a backer at the $5 level or higher, our producer level. But this coming week, and this will be my last publication for a month or so, because I'll be on vacation for about 2.5, 3 weeks, is I am revising my top 100 because as you
No.
as you've seen, we are very close to 500 episodes.
Ooh.
So no spoilers, but you know
Spoilers?
what we do, right? So we'll be updating those. Have not been officially updated in 2 or 3 years now, so it's time to go back and look at the list and make some tweaks. So I'm gonna do a like kind of a forward looking and backward looking introspection about how that process works. Like, what am I considering? How does this get evaluated? How do games get ranked against each other? How do games stay put? How do games get booted out? It will not reveal my new top 100 for for like the 8 of you who care, but um, it will go through the process of building that. 'Cause I don't think we see that a lot. I don't think we see that. There's a million top 100s out there. We don't see how people actually build their lists. They
You're
just
gonna.
kind of come out and be like, "Here's my list," and it could be completely arbitrary, and you wouldn't know. So
It's the Rubik building of it all.
right, yeah, like what factors go into this? And it's not just numbers. It's not just like my ratings. If you look at my top rated games, that's not my top 100.
Sure.
Um, so
Same.
it's kind of a fun process. I enjoy doing it every couple years when we do it. So I figured, hey, let's I'll record it. We'll talk about it for half an hour or so and tell you how it goes.
Sounds good. All right. So that's what's going on with us. Anthony, let's talk about the games that we want to get to the table. Let's talk about our acquisition disorders.
All right. For me this week, there is a new expansion up from Leader Games for Oath on Kickstarter. It is up for about 2 weeks more when you hear this, called New Foundations. So, Oath is a game from Cole Worley, one of my favorite game designers, designed Pax Pamir, as well as Root, which is my number 2 game of all time at the moment. And Oath came out, I want to say 4 years ago, I think it shipped. Um, and it is a very asymmetrical, kind of wonky kingdom building game in which it's not legacy necessarily, but things carry over in the course of play. Like, you really need to play the game multiple times with the same group to get the ultimate amount out of the game. We never officially reviewed this game on the podcast because I was able to play it 2 or 3 times with my group back in Pittsburgh, and then I moved to Philadelphia, and that 2 or 3 plays was not enough to assess how good the game was and whether it was worth recommending to everybody. I really, really enjoyed it. If I had to throw something on there, I would be like, "I'm happy I own this game," but I can't say whether you should buy it or play it or dodge it, or who should buy it or play it or dodge it, because there's more there. Like, the complexity in this game is absolutely emergent. It's depth over breadth, and I love that. I love games that are like, "Here are the rules. They're a little complicated, but they're once you get them, you get them." But the depth and complexity comes in repeat plays over time, and that is Oath 100%. Um, so it's been a weird one. I haven't been able to get it back to the table. I need a group of people who are committed, that are willing to sit down and play the game, at least 4 or 5 times. It looks like that's kind of the sweet spot to, like, get something out of this experience, and that's a lot because it's 2 to 3 hour game. So, in the age of everybody wanting new hotness and new stuff and shifting gears and not being able to get groups together, and me in particular not being able to get a group together, I was like, "I will revisit this in the future someday." Um, and now we have an expansion. So my gut reaction to this was, I'm not even why would I need an expansion? There's no way I need more content. I can't even get the old content to the table. And like the first half of the expansion, the new foundations part is exactly that. I'm like, it's you get like new traits and curses and all these deluxe tiles and new chronicle phase. The game's more complex. There's more depth to it. There's more denizens, new decks. It's all cool. It makes the game more interesting, but I'm like, I'm not playing it, so whatever. Um, if I do get it to the table, that stuff would probably be pretty cool. But the other half of this Kickstarter is the Clockwork Adversaries expansion, which allows you to play the game solo, which I thought was fascinating because it's not the kind of game that I would expect to work in a solo context. There's so much interaction and so many elements of how you interact with your opponents carry forward between the games. So, how would you do that? And so I'm reading through their Clockwork Adversaries, how they've done it, and the Clockwork expansions for Root are very good. I think they work quite well for a game that is highly interactive. So I was like, maybe this works. Let's see who's doing it. The designers here are Ricky Royal, who has done the solo versions of several different games, as well as the solo only game Renegade, which I absolutely love. One of my favorite solo games. Um, and then also working with Liz Davidson, friend of the show, who runs the Beyond Solitaire podcast. And so the two of them together have put this together. Ricky's worked on John Company. He did the solo mode for PAX Pamir. So he's worked with Cole Worley before. And Guilds of London, which has a great solo mode, despite kind of being a wonky, fiddly multiplayer game. Liz has not released any games before, but has a game coming out soon called Night Witches, and really knows her solo stuff. So she was actually on one of our solo episodes a couple years ago when we did our bracket. So I was like, oh, okay. Well, now I know that the people doing this know what they're doing. It's not like I love David Turcci, but he does all the solo modes. They get a little repetitive and they're super complicated sometimes. And I'm like, I
Mhm.
don't know. That's a lot. It's a lot to invest in a David Turcci solo mode. So Clockwork, I like. Roots Clockwork, fairly simple and straightforward. So we have new solo stuff. They promise a way to jump between solo and multiplayer games, which I think is really fascinating. I want to see how that works. We have content that's specific to the solo mode as you face like challenges and stuff, which I love because that's what makes solo games more fun is you have a specific challenge to overcome. Um, and it works with the new expansion. So that is what sold me on this. I think I'm in now. It's the solo mode sounds great. The upgrades to the old game are, it's more dice and resin pieces and bandit pieces and new tiles. That's all great and stuff. It's all just fancy stuff. Um, I could take it or leave it. Honestly, if it was just the new Foundations expansion, I would leave it. But with the Clockwork Adversaries, I'm deeply considering picking this up, and then maybe playing it solo will give me the little boost I need to like hunt down people and get them to the table and make them play this game. So Oath, New Foundations on Kickstarter now. Got a couple weeks. If you own Oath already, or if you don't and just want to back all in for everything, I think it's like $200. Um, it's a beautiful production, and if you have the group for it, and I cannot emphasize that enough, you need a group for this. It cannot just be something you bring and drop at game night.
Sure.
You need people who are willing to play at least 3 or 4 games. Um, it's not a legacy game, but it's also not just like a casual something. Um, Oath, New Foundation. Check it out.
Very nice. So, as far as an expansion's concerned, or do you think it's possible that designers, publishers here were like, people are not getting this to the table. No one's talking about it. It's not happening. It did well. It backed well. Maybe that was showing the need for the clockwork adversaries. Maybe
I, I would be interested to know how this developed. If it was like Ricky Royal and or Liz being like, "I'm working on this," and then they pitched it to leader, and
sure,
they're like, "Here's what I got," and they're like, "Oh, maybe we'll put this in a new campaign." Or if they went out and solicited people like, "We want a solo mode. Does anybody have something that would work?" Um, I would be fascinated to know like the direction that went.
because
It's not.
you're like the fourth or fifth person who's told me this about this game, because this was the big game, after Root for them.
Yeah,
And everyone was talking about it. People were excited about it. It got great kind of like preview reviews from like big names and big magazines. And like, this was going to be the thing. Everyone loved Root. This had similar artistic and mechanical kind of aspects to it, but had that whole wondrous idea of the campaign model and all that stuff. And I've never, like, you mentioned the game that you have it, but I have not heard anybody get it to the table. Anyone.
it's honestly the people who I know who've played it enough to get in deep love it.
Great.
They're like, "This game is brilliant." I played it the 2 times that I played it, and I was like, "I can see how it could be brilliant." But that's different, right? That's not saying it's brilliant, just saying like, "I
Sure.
can see." It's like watching the first 4 episodes of The Sopranos. You're like, "I can see how this would be very good,
Yeah.
but I haven't seen anything interesting yet beyond like the hook of the beginning of the series."
Sure.
And if you just stop there, then you can't recommend it to people. You're like, "Yeah, I guess they're mobsters. It's interesting." But not like this is one of the great, stories told in modern media. Um, so I don't know. I haven't gotten there, and I think a lot of people are in the same boat because people buy games on Kickstarter, they don't play them that much, right? And maybe that's a miscalculation by leader. Maybe we're off base here in our assessment of it. But people do not play games the way that designers want them to. They throw it on the table a couple times. They bring it to game nights. If people want to play the hotness, they play it.
Sure.
You get groups coming in and out. You don't have the same group of people constantly playing the same game. Um, at least I haven't historically. And the result is a game like this is hard to get to the table. You don't hear about it very much. So
Yeah.
hopefully the expansions address this at least a little bit. The solo mode certainly does because I can play it by myself. But it's a game I've always wanted to get back. It's been 4 years and I still hold on to it. I'm like, I'm gonna get this played somehow. It's gonna happen.
And I think that's the interesting thing about games too, is this type of game, as you're mentioning the scenario here, is a paradigm shift for gaming, right? Because the types of games that require a committed group are already doing an RPG.
Yeah,
And then this kind of unique crossover where games like Sleeping Gods or any of these kind of campaign games where you must play the campaign. It's just difficult. Again, it's like a lot of those tabletop games where they're like, and it's kind of a miniatures game. And you're like, oof, that's trying to draw in a crowd that already has a thing. And typically tabletop gamers, board gamers, they need the game that they can drop on the table and teach in a relatively reasonable amount of time and then somewhat be a one and done, because it just typically doesn't work for the tabletop meetup kind of vibe.
right. Yeah. To the point, like when they ran the Arcs campaign, they specifically said different people can come and go in the campaign. It's
Yes.
fine. And I'm like, it's still not gonna happen. That game's gonna have the same problem.
Yes.
But at least it's designed around that problem.
Yes.
Um, Oath is not even a campaign game. it's not really designed that way. It's just it doesn't really work unless the same group of people play it multiple times to
That's what I'm
understand what
saying.
it's
Yeah,
doing. It's so hard to describe, which is why I
sure.
haven't reviewed it. It's because I'm like, how do I describe this when I haven't actually gotten through the meat of it?
Yes,
Um, so yeah, I'm with you. Cole Worley's ahead of his time. I think a little bit here. I think the more we go along, the more people play it, we'll look back and like, man, that game's brilliant. But
yes.
we're not there yet.
Well, it's a personal campaign to get this to the table,
Yes,
at the very least,
sure.
and like a lot of things, and again, the general meme about RPGers trying to get together for game night. So, like you said, I mean, and to be fair, leader games, that's been their thing with all of their games. Like it's a trip to
Yeah,
get into. So
sure.
very cool. All right. Well, on the opposite side of that, the complete opposite, a quick, easy to get to the table game that's based on an IP that pretty much everyone knows. Star Trek. We mentioned this way early, way back in the day. Star Realms is doing a reskin with all the cool Star Trek ships because Star Trek has a lot of cool ships and a lot of cool factions. And it's going to be hitting pre order. And people will actually be able to pick this up from WizKid Games. And I'm sorry, Wise Wizards Games. I think always WizKids when I think Star Trek these days. So Star Realms, about again, two-player game where you're building up different ships that have different abilities that allow you to attack the health points of the other player, alongside with bases and super kind of starships and little tiny ships. Well, everything is still true. It looks like just a repasting redesign. It looks cleaner, it looks neater. I like it better. Now, I'm just not saying it because I'm a Star Trek fan, but also because I didn't necessarily like certain elements of the different races and aesthetics. I wasn't a fan of the blob ships, so to speak. This seems to make a little more sense with actual locations that we might all know, just even again, even if you're not a Star Trek fan, and a lot of the ships that we know. So when you actually see the Enterprise, that's a big ship. That's a flagship. If you know anything about Star Trek, it's like, oh, the Enterprise, that's the big important ship. Cool. Do you know that the X-Ray 390 blob ship is the big ship? Maybe not so much.
Right.
So this plays a lot better with certainly Star Trek fans, but also with just regular schmoes out there who are like, oh, I know Star Trek. I like Star Realms, or I like the concept of Star Realms. Which one should I get? For me as a Star Trek fan, it's a given. But for you who may not be a Star Trek fan, I think this still might be the way that you go because it's somewhat of a redesign graphically in the pictures and stuff. And again, I think it makes a little more sense because the ships have been thought out in the different weight classes. Whereas again, no fault to the original Star Realms, but I don't know your ships, I don't know your lore, I don't know your galaxies and things like that. So it's like maybe this, or I'll take maybe this. I don't know if this works together with this, but we'll find out. Here, it makes a lot more sense because we all have that social knowledge that we share.
Right.
So Star Trek, Star Realms, yay! It's a thing that you can get to the table, which is
Yeah.
honestly might be adding to the future rubrics for our top 100. Anthony, games that actually can get to the table.
Honestly, it already is in mine. Yeah, I'll talk about it on the Patreon next week, but it's 100% a factor in mine now. Um, I love this. I love that like Fantasy Flight's like we'll make our own, we'll make it slightly different, so we don't have to use their
Yeah,
IP or anything like that. Star Trek's like, can we just do your game with our IP?
that's
We're like,
right.
yeah, sure. Like, cool, we're done.
We're done.
Yeah, easy.
There is some cases we don't mind the pasted on, stuff, so to speak, and this is one of
Yeah,
those.
yeah, 100%.
I'm sure there's been a fan who already did it out there, and they were like, "Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, yeah. Why didn't we think of that?" But
Right.
now, that being said, thematically, you're playing a combination of ships. You're not just playing one faction. So, just like the original Star Realms, which made it a little more odd. Here, I don't know. Make up some random story. I do all the time.
Yeah.
So, cool.
Head cannon for days.
Absolutely. You got to fill in all those gaps. There's just a lot of gaps out there. All right, so those are the games that we want to hit the table. Let's talk about the games that did hit the table. We'll let you know if those games are a buy and you should run out and pick those games up. If those games are a play and you should sit down and enjoy them. If those games are a dodge and you should avoid them. Or, in fact, the games are the dreaded burn, then you should somehow get AI to, replicate it to the nth degree, sell it as an NFT, and make some
Yeah,
Bitcoin off of it. That's all I'm saying.
yeah. Game's terrible, but you might as well make some money.
Do you think on some level that they're like thrilled that they're in the hotness, right? They're
Oh
like,
yeah.
we're in the hotness. Just don't
If
look.
if you have so little care for society and human beings as your consumers, then of course they're excited about that. All press is good press, right?
And honestly, of the one hobby that is 100% based on like old school cardboard and wooden tokens, and they're like, new AI stuff that has no place here. Like we don't like your kind around here. We don't like your droids. Take your droids out of here.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we're gonna do it anyways. We made $1 million. You all suck.
It's
I'm like, ah,
attack of the clones here. We don't no. We're not
yeah,
cool with this.
yeah.
Not
Game will
cool
be
at all.
dead within a year. It's
It's
fine.
true. All right, Anthony. So what you play this week?
All right. So I'm going back to another it's not a classic, it's a modern classic. Cat in the Box Deluxe Edition. So Chris, you and I first played this at PAX
We
back
did.
in 2022. So with a couple fans of the show, and we liked it quite a bit, right?
We did. I have played so many trick taking games that it was surprising that they could do something new with trick taking, and also at the same time, you know, a little like you look at something, it's like, oh, that's adorable. That clearly can't be complex and fun. And
Right.
it was, even if it
Yeah.
was cat based.
It's clever. It's interesting. So
Very.
this one has hit my table a fair amount lately. Um, Partially because I brought it into my classroom because I have several STEM majors, physics and engineering majors, and I was like, oh, this is an interesting game. They might be interested in. Right? It's based on Schrodinger's cat and this idea of like probability and probability of different uh, potential variables, and it's still just a trick taking game in its heart. So it's like a clever, fun, cute twist on that. It's not really scientific, but it does make you have to think a certain way. And it was a pretty big hit. Like the people in class really enjoyed it. I had several people write about it, and so I've been bringing it back to the table myself. I'm like, oh yeah, this game is good. Like I had fun with this. And we won't. You and I most recently played this at Long Island Tabletop with Will. Um, the game is fairly simple in execution, right? But you still have to like twist your brain a little bit to wrap it around it. You have a hand of cards in which all of the suits are the same, right? The cards are numbered from 1 to 9, depending on the player count. It might be from 1 to 7. But they're all the same, they're all black cats. But you have a board between everybody and your little tokens that represent your own suit. And when you play a card, when you're leading, you say which suit the card is. It is a black cat, but you can decide if it is blue, yellow, or green. Red is the trump suit. You cannot lead with that until someone else has played it. But once they have, you can also lead with that. And so at the beginning of each round, you're going to bet how many tricks you think you're going to win based on the hand you start with, which is my favorite kind of trick taking game. I think they should all have this mechanic. Any trick taking game that does not have a betting system to it, I'm like, not a fan. Like, um, because it gives you some agency regardless of how bad your hand is. You have a terrible hand, you bet 0. You have a great hand, you bet 4 or 5. Right? In this particular game, you can choose between 3 options for betting. It depends on the player count. So with a full player count, it's 1, 2, or 3. The smaller player count, it might be 1, 2, or 4. So you can never bet 0, which I do love betting 0. But in this particular case, with the player counts, you can't really do that. But the real fun thing about this game is you can get to a point where you create a paradox. So if you have cards in your hand that cannot legally be played on any of the spaces that are currently available, so let's say that you have previously said, I have no blue cards, which is something you can do. You can say, I have no blue cards because I'd rather play it as a yellow. You can always do this. You don't have to follow in a suit. You can say, I don't have them. And then you remove your token from the blue on your personal player board. And now for the rest of the game, you cannot play blue because you don't have any blue. quote unquote, right? If you've done that and now the blue 4 is available and you have 4 in your hand, but all the other 4s are covered, you can't play that. You've created a paradox, and now the round is over, right? So that's an interesting element to the game you have to keep track of. Is you could jump out of a suit really early, and it could really benefit you early in the round, but later in the round, you might be in a bad place if all the numbers are left in that blue row, and you can't play to any of them, right? Which your opponents could pick up on and play against you. So it's a lot of this kind of maneuvering and thinking about like what your opponents are doing and what you're doing and what's available and what you can do and what you can't do and who's played in the Trump suits and who hasn't. Um, and so it's more complex than just I have these red cards, these blue cards, these yellow cards. I need to like manage them. It's what do other people potentially have? What cards have already been played? How many suits have been played? How many cards got left out this round? It's a lot of like you really have to pay attention constantly, and I really really enjoy that. So, Cat in the Box is a fantastic trick taking game. It's really engaging. It runs a little long. Um, every trick taking game has a number of rounds they want you to do. This one is 4 rounds. I feel like that's a little too much. The game drags a little bit. It can go like 45 minutes to an hour. But like any trick taking game, you could just sit down and play 1 round and call it a day. That's up to you. But for me, it's a buy. I love it. I've rediscovered it. I'm having fun with it with the family. I'm having fun with it just in general out in the world. Um, I did not back the big fancy stupid giant version of it because that's stupid. I just said the word stupid. I'm going to say it 3 more times. It's stupid. Um,
How do you
but
how do you really feel about
it's
that?
dumb, man. It's too big. What is with Bezier Games and their giant things that nobody wants? I don't get it.
I think they're
Um,
transitioning to a toy company, honestly.
yeah, maybe
They're
right.
like, "Can we sell toys too?" And the answer is like, not really." But
We
sure.
have giant cats and we have these big tiles for Ludwig. No,
Oh my
nobody.
goodness. Well, there you go. The cat can play on the tiles. That's the
Yeah,
only.
right. But yeah, like you don't expect to have like a trick taking game, which is fairly abstract, be fairly thematic as well. And this one does it. I love it. So it's a buy for me.
Like I said, this was surprising. Played endless numbers of trick taking games. I was a fan of trick taking, I think before you were a fan of trick taking,
Way before, yeah.
and then you became a big fan of trick taking. I think even more than I was. And having played trick taking games from like back in the day, spades and hearts and stuff like that, and then again seeing something brand new and inventive, and like you said, the betting mechanic was really interesting. That was a twist to the game itself. But just the idea of you have suits, but you really don't, and then there's this dwindling number of opportunities that actually lend itself to actually what can be possible in your hand, and how the other players play into that is so dynamic. There, it's typically when you play a trick taking game, it's like the cards you have, are the cards you have. If it's a shredding game or a ladder game or something like that, and like here, the possibilities are always open, and you can even win, or somebody else can lose. It doesn't mean you're going to get the most points possible because again, the betting and also the arrangement on the board as far as the tokens are concerned. So I like all of that, and it never at any point. And again, I don't have the giant cat or anything else as far as that's concerned, but it doesn't need to be anything more than that. Like that's solid. This is a solid game that I think you mentioned earlier. Is it a classic? Is it a modern day classic? I think certainly it will keep its place in the trick taking echelon of great games out there because it's cute, but it's really smart. I think the smartness of the game will keep it around.
I think so. Like I think this is up there with The Crew,
Oh wow. Okay.
in terms of like recent modern trick taking games that
Sure.
really just kill it, right? It's like The Crew, Cat in the Box, and maybe Fox in the Forest is like the three from the last 10 years that represent trick taking to me and what it can do. Like not just like what it is, because there's some classic ones that are amazing. Um, but like modern trick taking, like what can we do with this mechanic?
Sure.
And those three games really kind of explore it in interesting ways.
Yeah, I'll add just an honorable mention to that list, Diamonds. If you remember Diamonds
Diamonds is
from
great.
back in the
Yep.
day too. I stumbled across that in my rearrangement / cleaning. I was like, oh, what the heck has this been? This is a game.
Right.
It's a game I remember. Where have you been all these years, hiding out all these diamonds behind your little thin bank shield, so to speak?
Yeah,
All right.
Diamonds is fantastic. Yep.
Yeah, it's another one too that I think. Again, I think diamonds should be there, but I will say it because I am a fan of cuteness. I think the
Yep.
cuteness kind of carries over, it carries it up a step. So forgive me for that, but I think that is still a thing that
Yeah. Oh
happens
yeah.
out there. So
I'm with you.
well, speaking of cuteness, I have a little tiny cute game. It's called Mini Rogue. Mini Rogue has had two Kickstarter backs. They had Mini Rogue with its expansions, and then Mini Rogue the Council. I've had Mini Rogue, I guess at this point, almost a year. I picked this up at one of the booths over in Gen Con. I was like, I think I've seen this. I think I remember this. Again, I am not, solo games is not my thing, and co op games can be my thing. And the hack and slash rogue kind of situation, it's fine. It's a thing. I'm down for that. So I got to pick up the base game of this. Haven't played the expansions or the second season, so can't speak to that directly. I know the second season just wrapped up. I think recently, but I got to play it in particular because it came out on Board Game Arena, and I was like, I have the game. I've been meaning to play the game, and I played it on Board Game Geek. I'm sorry, Board Game Arena, and I was like, oh, I can play this. I can kind of blow through the rules because it's a rather small rule book to kind of pull through. Nothing too challenging or questionable as far as the game is concerned. So, basically, you're looking at a roguelike mini micro game. It's another one of those small games. I don't think the box is terribly small. It's a typical card box size game, and it's a dungeon crawl. So you're going through the dungeon, uh, face all the monsters and demons and scary stuff in order to get the mysterious ruby called the OG's Blood. That's basically the last baddie that you have to face in order to win the game. As I mentioned, you could play solo, which is the way I played it, or you could play as a co-op, 2-player co-op. That's basically where it stops. And the game itself has a number of different characters you could choose from. So with the base game, you have 4 characters. You have a mage, a crusader, priestess, and rogue. And it's pretty cool because each of the characters have 2 special abilities, and they also have different stats to kind of start with as far as money, health, food, and other kind of fun stuff. And then as you go through the game with your character, you are facing a grid of 9 cards that are on the main board. Again, very easy to set up, and basically you are going to die. So you place your token if you have the basic version. If you have the fancy version, you have fancy stuff. But you place your token at the start of this 9-card grid on the top left, and then as the game goes, you make decisions on which of the 2 adjacent cards do you want to move towards in order to get to the final baddie at the bottom. If you're able to defeat the final monster, and again, there's all those kind of things like the Spider Queen and the Cursed Dragon, all kind of fun stuff, the Ghoul and stuff like that. They only get stronger and worse as the game goes on, but of course, your XP goes up at the same time as well. You'll also get special abilities as far as experience is concerned, armor, health. Money is pretty cool in this game. Usually, when games are this small, the market really isn't a thing. Here, it's a thing. You're going to pick up gold pieces in order to raise your health and pick up potions that allow you to kind of get through the game. The game primarily is rolling a handful of dice. At the start of the game, you have a character dice and there's a dungeon die, but there's also poison dice and curse dice, and you'll get additional characters dice throughout the game. The character dice are your skills, and they're also your combat. So those dice are very important, D6s. And then the dungeon dice are there to determine how bad a baddie you are facing in there, or how bad of a situation might be in there. So you set up the 9 grid, you start exploring orthogonal. You deal with skill checks. You deal with combat, dealing with monsters, of course. And then you try to avoid as much as the bad as you can until you get to the last person. And then the last person, you really try to mess up as much as possible. Along with your special abilities, along with the potions, you're going to have a number of opportunities to heal up and grow and expand your attack and your experience, which will give you more dice And really, if you ever play a dice game, the only thing that you want in a dice game is more dice. This gives you more dice to roll, which is a lot of fun. And it's a quick, fairly easy game. I honestly, when I threw it onto board game arena, I was just like, I don't know the rules. I think it's simple enough. And basically, you're clicking and rolling dice, and it's telling you what the outcomes are. So you take the better outcomes, of course, and you avoid the bad stuff if you can. And my first playthrough, I almost got to the complete end. And again, since it's a roguelike game, you're meant to die, learn stuff, rearrange the cards, and go out there again. The game itself is high quality. I mean, the cards are really nice. The artwork is great. Nothing too fancy here. Again, if you get the expansion edition, great. Custom dice come along with the game. It's a great little game. Mini Rogue. If you're looking for a solo game and something quick and easy to play, it's a buy.
Cool. Yeah, that's a fun sounding game. I think I remember talking about this maybe when you bought it. It was like, this looks clever and cute and quick, and the solo component of it obviously always appeals to me. Uh, the I feel like there's something new coming out for this soon, right? Or was it on Board Game Arena? Did you mention that?
It's on Board Game Arena. They did have their second campaign, which back not too long ago. So
Right. That was like back in April. Yeah.
yeah, so there'll be more content coming after this. Again, I'm not the biggest solo person, so you'll have to take Anthony's word as far as solos are concerned. But as far as someone who is uh, typically not the biggest fan of solo games, I was able to get this out, able to enjoy it, and it didn't feel too small. And I like
Mm,
that about a solo game that's supposed to be a micro game, so to speak. Maybe with the other expansions, it's better, or maybe with
right.
the other expansions, it's too much. We don't know, but maybe in the future we will know, and we'll do an episode on that.
Right. Yeah, that balance is hard. Like, is it too much? Is it too little? Like, I like too much. Give me a solo game that takes up the whole
It's
table. I'll be
true.
playing Mage Knight for 2 weeks. But a lot
I
of people don't want that. I understand that.
Yeah, I think with a solo game, and I respect that as far as the big setup for the big game, the epic game you're going to get to the table because you get everything lined up. But that becomes so much of the game time. I think.
Yeah.
So, again, I don't know. The micro games. Again, we could do an episode where we just like rule that certain micro games aren't micro games. This is kind of micro. This is definitely
Right.
like it's 9 cards that you're going to put on a table with a bunch of dice. It's fine.
Cool.
All right. All right, so that's everything that we hit the table this week. Let's get on to our feature review. Our feature review this week, of course, is games that need an expansion. Now, do it now. Bring
Do it.
Come on. We already talked about this. It's so late in the show. Could these come out now? Please come out. We like to play these
We
games.
told you to do it.
Man,
Come on.
some publishers, geez,
I don't listen.
they have one job: publish an expansion for a great
Yep.
game, so it can
Do
be
it.
better. Slackers, I tell you, somebody out there.
Get on it.
All right, Anthony. So why don't you take us through what we're looking at for expansions?
All right. So we started this list back in 2018.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's
Are
been
we
a
that
while.
old yet?
We are. We're
Man.
so old. That's not even nearly how far back this podcast goes. That's like halfway through. That's the midpoint.
Wow, people, listen to all those episodes really quick.
I know.
Catch up.
It's pre-pandemic, so it was like a million years ago.
That's true.
So we made a list of 10. We're gonna run through those real quick and tell you, did it release an expansion, or are we still waiting?
Aw.
Yeah. So number 10 on that list back in the day was photosynthesis.
The tree game with the growing
Yeah.
of the trees.
We were super hot on this game back in the day. It did release an expansion 2 years later, and it's called Under the Moonlight.
Yes.
So it introduced animals,
It did.
which was cool.
Uh-huh.
And then you have the moon kind of turning the opposite direction of the sun and casting moonlight throughout the
Smart.
woods.
Very smart.
So it seemed really cool and interesting. I'll be perfectly honest. I had sold my copy of the game by then. So apparently the lack of an expansion for the first 3 years of its existence just like burned me out and I was done. But someday I'll try that and I'll let you know.
I remember it coming out with this expansion. I thought it was a very smart expansion, and I did not pick up the expansion. I will also admit on that. I think, as you mentioned, I think the expansion took a little too long to get out there. and I think it got a lot of gameplay. Like the base game got a lot of gameplay. I'm still wondering again, I still have the base game. I recently moved it. I'm like, "Oh, this is the thing. This is here." So, maybe one day? I don't know. Again, this is always the hard part too, where you play a game out and you're like, "I feel kind of burnt out about this game." It does have an expansion. I don't know. So I'm not sure. But again, I'm glad it does, and it's out there, and
Yeah.
it seems thematically to work. I can't speak to if it practically works. It's got a 6.9 on Board Game Geek, so kind of,
Maybe. I
maybe,
guess we'll find out.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not really there for us, but it exists. So they pulled it off, and thank you, you're welcome, etc.
Woof, we did it.
We did it.
I'm telling you.
Uh, all right. The next one is Civilization: A New Dawn, which we famously played at a PAX,
Oh my
and
goodness.
we learned nothing about the game, and I bought it anyways because I'm a crazy person. Um, but it turned out the game's actually very good, and it jumped up my playlist. And I was like, this game still needs an expansion because it's a Fantasy Flight game, and
Uh-huh.
all Fantasy Flight games need expansions. They released one
They did?
in the midst of the pandemic, and
Wow.
then it disappeared because Fantasy Flight is just chaotic nonsense
Uh-huh.
at this point. It is a fantastic expansion to this game.
Yes.
It's it is rated an 8.3 on Board Game Geek. I would agree with that. It kind of fills a lot of the gaps that the game had.
Mhm.
So the original game is just like it's very Euro-y. It doesn't really have exploration or military elements to it that are built in there. This adds those. The one side effect of the game is that it makes it a fair bit longer,
Oh, no.
right? Yeah, like the game is fairly short generally for a Civ game. It's like 90 minutes to 2 hours. With the expansion, I would say you're looking at 2 to 3 hours. I'm fine with that because I like me some long Civilization games, and I really like the way this game implements the Civilization elements. It also adds a few more civs, which is always nice. It adds a fifth player, which is stupid, but you can ignore that if you want. Uh, I will say too that like during the heart of the pandemic, they also released a solo expansion that's a print and play. It was not part of Terra Incognito, but it is compatible with that. But it's also very good. So, Fantasy Flight did right by this game, despite kind of their slow, uh, just decline in death over the last 4
Terrible.
years.
Yeah.
But it is great if you can get the game with the expansion. It is fantastic.
I have not played with the expansion, and I think honestly, because the expansion was not there when I did play the base game or did consider picking up the base game, I didn't pick it up. I think if this expansion was out at that time, I would have picked it up and the expansion as well. So
Right.
it's kind of heartbreaking. I don't know. Again, like you said, with all the chaoticness that goes on there, I don't know if we'll ever see this as far as like a revised, new version of it. So
Right.
yeah. But we did again. We did a thing.
Yeah, we did it. It happened.
Yes.
All right. The next one was Zolkin, the Mayan calendar. Uh, I think this was one of your picks,
Mhm.
and it was Simone Luciani and Daniela Ticini's first game together.
Aw.
Um, it has an expansion, Tribes and
It
Prophecies, which
does.
adds a lot of asymmetry with 13 tribes, but we didn't. We felt like it was still missing something,
Yes.
right?
And it had like little tiny mini expansions, but that really wasn't what it was missing. And some of the problems of the Tribes and Prophecies was it really it overcorrected.
Right,
So now, when you typically play the game, you were going to play one of, I think, three or four different paths to victory. And now, based on your particular faction, that was your thing. Like, that's it.
right,
So it certainly needed more.
right.
And I think, again, like we talked about previously, like, I think as brilliant as it is, I think the base game just kind of burnt it out.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, and they just didn't come back to it because they were like, "Oh, we did a thing. This was the thing." And you're like, not so much." But yeah,
Yeah. All right. Next up, we had Jump Drive, which was the very quick, very accessible kind of spin on Race for the Galaxy from Thomas Lehman. It was like a 30-minute version of Race for the Galaxy. Um, but it was like not very much in the box. The game was very quick. not a lot happened.
Sure.
They did release an expansion just last
I
year.
mean,
So
what the heck? Wow.
5 years after our episode,
Took them long enough.
right? And 6 years after the game came out, they're like, "Here's an expansion." Out of nowhere, and it kind of went nowhere because people are like, "For what game? What are we talking about?" So
What's a jump drive? I don't remember that game.
yeah, what is that game? Is that even in print? What are you talking about? Rio Grande, never change. So new game cards, new start worlds, new goals, material for a fifth player because boo.
Because they love you,
And
Anthony. Because
and
they
a
love
bunch
you.
of challenges for solo play. Let's ignore the fifth player. Let's ignore it. They
Ah.
don't love me, Chris. They hate me. Stupid fifth player. Um, so it's more asymmetry, more solo options. It's just more options in general. People seem to like it. I did not pick it up because it's been 7 years and I have long since sold this game. But
Sure.
it's I'm glad they came back to it.
I'm glad too. I own Jump Drive, but again, I didn't even know this actually came out because I felt like it was done. It needed
Yeah,
more, but I felt like it was done. I'm glad that they listened to us because that makes me feel a lot better.
yeah, yeah. No, it's great that it happened, but it's crazy that it took so long.
It's true.
All right. Next up, we had Aura and Labora
Hmm.
from Uwe
I've
Rosenberg.
heard of that guy.
Yeah, that guy who does all these games. No expansions. There's a mini expansion from a magazine that came out a
Yes.
couple years ago with some wonder tiles, but as is, it's just Aura and Labora.
Yeah. It certainly needed a little bit more because it was another one of those games where there was a I wouldn't say a path to victory, but there was certainly a best path. The only thing I could say that kind of quasi it doesn't count as an expansion, but I talked about this recently. Black Forest is somewhat in the vein of Ora Labora and of Glass Road as far as mechanics are concerned. So maybe this was in the back of their head for quite some time, but uh,
Yeah.
it was re-released. Ora Labora. I have the new version of it, but nothing else beyond that.
Right. Yeah. All right. Next up, Antique 2, Matt Gertz's game about fighting for civilization in the Mediterranean. It's a sequel to Antique, so it's already kind of implementing and re-implementing, what was done in that original game, which also did not have an expansion. Antique 2 does not have an expansion. Antique Duellum, which was the two-player version of this, also no expansions, but multiple versions thereof. I think for this one, we were just hoping for it's a very tightly designed, well balanced game,
Hmm.
but it'd be interesting to see more things happening, more maps,
Sure.
even from a designer like Matt Gertz, who does games like Concordia with 43 maps. Uh, we never got that, which is fine because we still have Concordia, and this game is still brilliant, but it remains on its own, no new stuff.
I think the challenge or problem with the game was, if there is one, and I would argue there is, in a multiplayer game, if you are one of, if not the last player in the game, everything by the time you get to take your turn is kind of taken up,
Yeah,
and you are chasing for scraps, and you almost
it
have to go towards the market just completely in order to pull a win off in that game. I remember doing that.
yeah,
So,
it gets very expensive to build in places when everybody else has already been
and I
there.
don't think there's not really a good fix to that. Concordia has, resources that kind of compensate for that. Here, not so much.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I do love it though, as like a really quick playing 6-player game.
Hmm.
Glass Road, you kind of mentioned already,
Yep.
is kind of in that Aura and Labora pedigree. No major expansions, a bunch of promo packs, but that's about it. We also have on the list First Class, which famously has space in the box for expansions, and then nothing came of that.
And it went out of print, which
Yeah,
broke my
the
heart.
game is out of print. They released several modules. There was like a module F, module
Uh
G
huh.
as promos, of course, but that's it. And then yeah, no major expansion for it since.
I mean, it was built with expansions in mind. So
Yeah.
First Class, all aboard the Orient Express, to the point where you had like a murder kind of mystery
Hmm.
expansion that you could play as. So when they had these little mini kind of expansions that you could throw in, awesome. And then like the game's out of print, which is it's terrible because it's one for me. It's one of the best games, and I don't. I still can't understand why this is not in print.
It's so good.
Yeah.
It's such a good game. Ah, man, it's a shame.
Hmm.
Number 2, however, did get an expansion, famously on Kickstarter. Big one, made a lot of money. Grand Austria Hotel Let's Waltz came out in 2021.
Right. Yeah. That has like the expansions are bigger than the game. There's just so
Yeah,
much.
so much stuff packed in here. So this was on Kickstarter. It made a ton of money. They later have re-released it into retail. It took a long time though, like almost 2 full years to get this into retail. I think you and I both backed
We
this.
did.
We famously played it on my back porch in the
Yeah.
sun.
That was
Got a nice sunburn out of
we
it.
did.
Um, and it did not really fix the fundamental problem of the game. So it's a good expansion, but it doesn't really resolve the issue of like the imbalance in the deck.
That was so surprising that they went to the lengths of like it's two kind of mini expansions. I wouldn't even say mini expansion. It's like two full expansions
Right.
in
With
it.
5 modules, there's a lot
There's
there.
so much in there. And you're like, clearly they're going to do the one thing that was a problem about the game. And that was always the thing I harped about. Like, there's just one problem in this game. You just got to address this. And they're like, we see that, but instead of like making the game a little stronger and tighter and streamlined, now there's so many different modules at play and different theaters to play your figures and stuff that it kind of takes away the problem of the deck by just making everything else equally important or just more stuff. I don't like that. I'm just
No,
it was a lot. It's not bad. It was just a lot. So
it's a lot.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yep. That's where it is. It's a lot. Number 1 on the list from 2018 was Spirium, which we've talked about at length.
It's
It's one of my favorite games. I love this game, but I I can't help but admit the last like phase of the game, the C
yeah.
cards are the same every time you play them.
It's true.
There are only 9 of them, so it's always the same 9 cards in a slightly different permutation, whereas the A and the B decks are more than the number you need. So if you've played the game before, you have a huge advantage over people who have not. You know how much the cards are going to cost, you know which ones there's going to be, you know where they're going to come out. Um, it makes the game not as fun if you're new to the game, and it makes it harder to teach. And just honestly, even a mini expansion, a promo would have been huge for this. Although I would gladly take a big Kickstarter reboot with all the fancy stuff, with new content on top of it. But we just haven't seen it. It's been 11 years. We still haven't seen it.
Yeah, I mean obviously you're pointing out the real challenge with the game. If it wasn't locked into that certain card draw, like those cards have to come out. And it could even be a mini expansion. Just some more cards. Just throw in a half a deck of more cards and I think it's fine. I'd like to
Yeah,
see it more of it. I think it's certainly something that if a new publisher would take it on, this could get I mean it's a small game, but this could get a like brass kind of version of it because I think it has that same kind of literal spurium element that Nuculum kind of took off with. So it could have been a thing. It certainly could have.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, it's a shame. So it's still up there. It's still in my top 10 for whatever reason, despite that. But it's not doing what we want it to. So, what we wanted to do real quickly here at the end is add a few more games to the list. Some games that have come out since then that are also due for expansion. So, we're kind of rapid fire through. We have a good number of lit games here that we think would also benefit from new content. First up, we have one that Chris, I know you added After the Empire.
Yes. After the Empire was a game that I was hotly anticipating. I remember I watched it on Kickstarter. I watched it then on GameFound, and then eventually I picked it up. And I did not get a chance. I did try to get all the extra little plastic characters and stuff, but that's really not the expansion part that it needs. It is cool to build this little castle. It is cool to get the refugees to help you out and the buildings to help you out, but there's nothing more than that. And there's no player interaction other than maybe you could take a worker placement spot. There needs to be player interaction. So please give us a way to attack adjacent castles or give us something else to do, because it's really, do you want one of the two cards that are out there available, and do you want to upgrade a particular thing on your castle? That's it. And then it just needs more. It's a good game, but it's incomplete as far as I feel. Like it's a play, but just a play honestly because you're building the castle. If it wasn't for building the castle, it probably would be a dodge, just because there's not
Mhm.
enough there.
Yeah, for sure. For me, Black Angel is one.
Oh yeah.
This is a game from 2019. This is the last like big game that I hunted down at Gen Con. This was the Gen Con before COVID, and it is Twa in space, and I love so much about it. I played it like 10 times the month after I got back from Gen Con. I really loved it. I haven't played it since, and part of the reason for that is there's not really a core narrative to the game. There's no like thing you're doing. There's no like journey you're going on. Twa is interesting because you are developing defenses, you're fighting off, these invaders, you are fulfilling these requirements for these different nobles. And that's kind of missing from this game where you have like everything's being run by robots and you have all these things out in space, but it doesn't all congeal in a way that makes sense. So I would love an expansion that gave me a narrative, or barring a narrative, some kind of central focus the way Twa does, especially with like the ladies expansion, which really kind of adds some depth and focus around the elements of what you're doing in the city of Twa. So they never came back to this game. It was a huge release back in 2019. It was like one of the hot games from Asmodee. Tool artwork, like the crew from Pearl Games coming back. But alas, we never got more content, and I don't know that we will at this point. I think Pearl Games is shut down. Um, and I'm not sure that they're going to come back to this one in particular after this much time. But I still hold on to it. I still really would like to get this back to the table with the right group of people. But um, a good expansion would really help me get there.
I remember seeing this at a game night. People were playing in another room. I was really excited about playing it, and the people were just puzzled and perplexed.
It is a very hard game to teach.
Yeah.
Like even if you've played Twa, you're like it's like Twa, but then these 11 things are different. And I'm like, what? Like, yeah, these 11 things, and it just you have to play it twice in a row almost, which is a tough sell.
Sure.
But I got lucky. I got a group that was willing to do it, and then we played it a bunch. But since then, I have not played it.
I mean, maybe for a future episode, there should be games that should be simplified, like a new version where it's a
Yeah,
little smaller, just to kind of introduce you to play the game. I don't agree with this whole you got a new game, play the basic boring version of it, which is going to take you 2 or 3 hours to play, and then play the fun version. I don't like that. Give me a
no,
fun version in a smaller version that you've crafted that way, because that
yeah,
makes a lot more sense.
100%.
Mhm.
All right, next one up here that I see you've bolded is Brazil Imperial.
So, going through my collection, for many reasons, what am I going to do with these games, right? Like, and this was one of my most hotly anticipated games. This was down in South America. It did not come up to the US for quite some time. I think it was Portal Games that brought it up,
Yeah.
and it was quite expensive because that's what Portal does with games.
Uh huh.
And I got it to the table. Everyone said it was a scythe killer, and it's beautiful. It's got so many great elements, and it was tremendously disappointing. And I just like I wanted to cry. I didn't cry. I didn't cry, but I wanted to cry because like the beauty of the game, the craftsmanship, everything went into this, which is wonderful. It's just not enough. And with Scythe, with its like 4 or 5 or 6 expansions now at this point, like, can you give me one that just makes this game better? Just give me one, because it's just limited in itself, and I think it's suffering from that. So it's really a plea. I'm telling you, like, I don't want to get rid of this game. I want you to give me an expansion. I will pay the monies so to make the game get better, so I can actually get this game to the table, because it's beautiful in its historical reenactment, and it has a lot of really great elements to it. And again, as much as I love Scythe, I wouldn't mind something killing it. So please,
Yeah.
you know,
I felt exactly the same about this game. It is on my trade pile,
Yeah.
but I would also like to be able to keep it if I could.
Yeah. So if you could do that quickly, we both would appreciate that.
Yeah, get on it. Come on.
Yep.
Star Wars Rebellion, I threw on the list, even though the game is brilliant and the expansion makes the game even better. Because I feel like the game could benefit from some more ground level intrigue. And the reason I say that is we have now Andor, the fantastic show
Ooh.
about that ground level intrigue and what happened before Rogue One, leading up to all of the materials of this game, right? The expansion that makes the game so good is Rise of the Empire, which is based on Rogue One. So give us an expansion that builds on that, that goes back even further and shows us like the rise of Andor.
So
Uh,
could this be like Hunt for the Ring that you play before you
yes,
play War of the Ring, and it kind of sets you up for Rebellion?
yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that, like a hidden movement type thing. Like let's find Andor because that's basically what that whole first series is.
Yeah.
Where is this guy?
What's up with this guy?
Yeah, what's going on? I would just love some more political intrigue in this game, right? Like it's a lot about space battles and managing the planets and where are people hiding. It's big in scope. Give me a component of it that's small in scope. Like going back to like Rune Wars even, where you have this big epic battle over this huge map, but then you also have your little hero kind of jumping around doing cool stuff. War of the Ring does that too. I would love to see more of that at a Star Wars Rebellion.
And I think it's honestly the show itself is, again, we haven't seen the new part that's coming up soon, but the first half is like, honestly, I feel like the best depiction of the Empire
Oh yeah.
and the political machinations that are happening. So that would be fantastic.
Yep. 100%. Um, a few more here. Let's see. We got Gaia Project
Sure.
that never had an expansion. Now part of that is the reason for that is that game kind of incorporated a lot of what the other expansions for Terra Mystica were doing. They have very recently announced the Lost Fleet expansion coming out later this year, but we don't really know enough about it to know what that's doing or why it's doing it. And I've already made this list, so there you go, folks. But it has new factions and new stuff and new maps and things. But I would really like to see them kind of expand what that tech board does because it's space and tech boards are like that's what space is. So give me more of that.
Can we get a graphical redesign while you're at it?
I wish.
Because
the ex-
it's just it honest, like its big brother is just, it crushes it as far as the artwork and is concerned. Like it's just
I know. I don't get it. Like this, Dennis Lohausen, who does the artwork here, has done the artwork on so many games. Also did the artwork on Terra Mystica, but it's so much better. Like, why is it so much worse than Gaia Project?
this reminds me of
Um,
like space artwork maybe in like the 1950s, where like the
mm,
telescopes weren't that good, so they didn't realize that like space is beautiful.
hmm
And like it's just cosmically just enticing, and yet when you play that game it's like you just want to you want to fall asleep. It's just it's
yeah. We've been spoiled by a lot of Ian O'Toole space artwork lately,
it's
though.
true.
Like just bright and colorful and vibrant and neon.
Well, honestly, like terraforming, not terraforming Mars, assumptions, I mean that's a whole other
No, no,
space.
not that one.
Yeah.
That's the worst.
uh the Terra Mystica, right? um you just The artwork was so good that it overlooked some of the gameplay elements. Like it was
Mm,
fine. This was the opposite, right? Like
yeah.
you leaned into like those tracks. Stick a thing on those
It's not
tracks.
pretty.
It's not pretty.
It is not
Nope.
pretty. It's a great game, but it's not pretty for
It's a
sure.
great game. Absolutely.
All right. Next one up, I have Kanban EV. So the reason I put this on the list, and I put this one on the list, is
You would.
Vital Lacerda makes big, brilliant, super thematic, heavy Euro games, right? And one of the best expansions that's come out in the last few years is For on Mars. It's the Martian invasion expansion with like multiple modules that really transform that game into something interesting and super thematic and cooperative and potentially solo and whatever you want to do with it. I would love to see a similar treatment to really any of his games, but I think Kanban EV could be particularly interesting because you have a character in there with Sandra, like your angry, mean, uh, kind of floor manager going around, like pushing you around, especially in the solo mode. You have this beautiful artwork and layout from Ian O'Toole. You have just generally the feeling of like building up a business, and you could do that over time. You can make that into like a legacy type campaign type thing. There's a lot you could do here. Um, but honestly, apply everything I just said to Vinos or the Gallerist, and I'd be happy with that too. But yeah, Kanban, give us an expansion. The new games, I don't really want an expansion for Weather Machine. I don't really want an expansion for Inventions. I want it for one of the older games that really does interesting things.
Sure, agreed.
We have Mechs versus Minions, which was a huge mega launch from Riot Games back in 2016, and that was it. That's all they did.
It's true.
They're like, here's a game. We have released a game, and then they did like another like Tellstones type thing, which people hated.
Oof.
A couple years later, but this one is in the top 100 of all time. It is a programming style game in which like, you have all these different miniatures fully painted in this big sprawling thing with multiple different campaign elements to it. It's cooperative, and the game is just like it's really good. And like I know, like Chris, you've mentioned to me, I don't know League of Legends very well, but you've mentioned that it doesn't really represent the theme very well.
Almost not at all, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
So
some of the characters, but that's about it.
yeah, so like I understand that part of it, but as someone who doesn't know the theme, I really enjoy the game.
Sure.
Um, but they never came back. And whether it means they didn't make money or this was just a passion project or what, I don't know. But it sold pretty well. They sold like 60,000 copies, which is a lot for a board game, but maybe not enough for a video game publisher.
It had to be a passion project because, I mean, it was relatively cheap. I mean,
Yeah.
relatively. I mean, I think it was $75.
Yeah, for what you got, it was very cheap.
Yes. And
Like in today's money, it would be 250
it
easy.
was high quality, and it had, I think, the app integration as far as storytelling components were concerned. So even though it was not the game, and I was rather disappointed with it, it was still fine. And again, if they did an expansion, they could certainly incorporate a lot of the materials that are already there. So,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, there's a whole universe there to draw from.
yes, absolutely.
All right, Marco Polo 2. We had a big sprawling expansion for Voyages of Marco Polo. We did not get a similar expansion for Marco Polo 2. Bring us back to Europe. Bring us back to Venice. Huh?
Yeah, I don't
Huh?
disagree with this, and I d is it that they just, like, people wanted the shipping, the movement elements to be so much more flushed out, and they did it, and then they just, "We're done." 'Cause, again, like, the first one had so many expansions and little modules and giveaways and stuff like that, so,
Yeah, like this almost felt like an expansion that they turned into a full game,
yeah.
um, which in turn would not get its own expansion, which I get. Oh well, it's a good game.
It
I
is.
still prefer the original.
Weirdly enough, I do too. I think that you always would think the new version would be profoundly better in so many different ways, and it's like, it's fine,
Right,
and it's different, and you have to, and I think it should have that sticker on the cover, which is like, "You must move in this game. You must ship. It's not just contracts anymore, kids."
right,
Because if you don't know that, you're gonna have problems all day long.
right. Yeah, absolutely. Like more stuff, please.
Absolutely.
All right, next one up here on the list is another one I put on the list before seeing that they just announced an expansion for it. But we'll run with it
Look,
because why
you put
not?
it out there, they heard you. Quantum entanglement, move on, my friend. You got it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They are picking up the brainwaves that I put down 4 days ago when I set up
This is
this
what I'm
list.
saying.
Um, Barcelona,
Uh-huh.
one of the best games of last year from
Yes.
Danny Garcia and Board and Dice, is getting an expansion, Passeig de Gracia, which is an iconic part of Barcelona, which is a much smaller, obviously, uh, function of the whole total thing. It's a road that'll be connecting Barcelona and the former town of Gracia, which is now a district of the city in the rebuilding of the city. So it's like zooming in a little bit on the game or on the element of the game within that city. Uh, what that looks like or how it's going to develop, I don't know. There's not a lot of information here, but it is set to come out this year, um, probably at Essen. There's also new scoring tiles, new Sagrada Familia tiles, new building bonus tiles, all that stuff. Good promos. So it's Board and Dice. They generally support their stuff.
Sounds good.
Zapotec is another board and dice game that I really enjoyed a few years ago, but kind of ran its course fairly quickly for me. It's a Fabio Lopiano game, so it's quick. It's like an hour and a half tops, and it's all about like building out these different elements of the Zapotec, like different little plastic pyramid pieces throughout this kind of relatively tight map. And it's just one of those games which Lopiano's games tend to do, where if you've played it enough times, you kind of get a good sense of what it's doing and what it's trying to do, and it kind of fades away, right? So it's not that the game is bad all of a sudden. It's not that I don't want to play it anymore. It's that it just doesn't pop to the top of my head as a game I want to get to the table. I would love to see further support for it. It's a good system. It's a good baseline of rules. Nothing else came for it, and it's only been 2 years. We might see more. I just mentioned Gaia Project, which has been out for 8 years, and all of a sudden there's an expansion coming out this year. So maybe, but Zapotec I think is an uh, underrated game.
Hear that?
All right, and the last one on the list here from you, Chris, is Sanctum.
Yeah, Sanctum was another game that was going to give us that big Diablo 2 experience with a bunch of players at the table doing some really interesting character development as far as like moving things around to upgrade your characters. And you go down the road and you face a lot of baddies along the way, and then you face the ultimate kind of baddie, and then like it's not the greatest thing. It kind of where like the game has such a great build up for the character and for the multiple players at the table, and that end just doesn't bring it home. And there's just nothing else to play beyond that. So it's almost like you're playing role player to kind of build up your character. You're running through some basic kind of scenarios where you fight a couple of guys, and then like the big end is not there. And I think it needed an expansion. The game kind of got lost and disappeared and did the ether. I think if this came out with an expansion with a one or two or three more final boss monster kind of things, I think it would revive the game big times. I think this would be a big seller for CGE. I think it just maybe because of the pandemic. I don't know. Like it just didn't it was 3/4 of the way done. It just needs a little bit more to be great.
Yeah, this was totally one of those games that came out like late 2019.
Yeah.
Maybe would have built during 2020,
Yeah.
but completely died instead. Because I'm looking at my rating. I gave it an 8.
Yeah.
I really like this
Yeah.
game, but I haven't played it since 2020, because there's no reason to go back to it. It's not doing anything interesting. It doesn't like evolve over the space of the game.
No.
It needs more.
It needs more. Again, more big monsters at the end, or some side quests, or companions or something else to go along with it. But when it came out, it was going to be the game for CGE because they make so many great games. And then I remember the pandemic hitting and just like never heard a word about it or an expansion, and still has not gotten one. So we would be really happy if you would release an expansion, my friends. CCG.
Please do.
Yes. All right, everyone. So there you go. Our hopes, our dreams, our fantasies of great expansions coming out to enliven these wonderful games that hopefully will get some table time with a great new expansion. Until next time, this is Chris.
And this is Anthony.
We'll save you a seat at the table. Take care, everyone.